We are continuing our summer series that we have been in for the last 2 weeks called Promises, Promises. And our pastors, Pastor Adam and Pastor Rebecca, kicked this series off 2 weeks ago, talking about how obedience is the key to experiencing everything that God has promised for us. And last week, our Next Steps director, Aaron Peterson, talked about how God has promised to direct our lives if we trust in Him. I have loved this series so much. We have a theme verse for the series, and I would like to read it for us, but if you would stand with me, just in honor of God's word this morning. This is the verse that's kind of pushing us all summer long. This is Psalms 145, verse 13. The Lord always, and somebody say always, always, yeah, the Lord always keeps His promises. He is gracious in all He does. You can have a seat. He always keeps His promise, every single one. You may not know this, but there are over 7,000 promises in the Bible, and every single one of them is good news for us. And He keeps every single one. When I was trying to choose which promise I was going to speak on the day, it was actually kind of hard. I felt like I was at a Brazilian steakhouse, where they just bring out cut after cut of meat, and you just want to say yes to everything, right? Because they all look so good. That's how I felt trying to choose a promise. And then I looked at the calendar, and I realized I wasn't just getting to preach on a promise of God. I was getting to preach on a promise of God on Father's Day. Are you kidding me? I love Father's Day. Happy Father's Day, every dad in the room. Come on. How cool, right? I get to be up here with a microphone this morning. My family is going to be in here listening to me talk, and I can say whatever I want, and they won't get mad at me because it is Father's Day, right? Isn't that cool? In honor of Father's Day, I thought I would share just a little bit about my dad this morning. Is that okay? Can I talk about my dad for a little bit? My dad is great at a lot of things. My dad is a crier. If I start crying today, blame my dad. He did this to me. But also, one thing I have always admired about my dad is he is a great storyteller. So what I thought I would do today is share with you a story that my dad loves to tell. And I have heard him tell this story over and over so many times, and it is a story about me. And it actually is a little embarrassing, but I'm going to share it anyway. When I was around 8 years old, my dad played softball in one of those church softball leagues. And so before his game, we arrived to the ballpark early, and there were actually some other teams already playing. So my brother and I, we wanted to head out to the outfield behind the fence to see if we could try to catch a home run. So we asked our dad, is it okay if we go out, try to catch a home run? My dad said yes, but 3 important words, do not run, which turns out was really, really good advice, and I wish I had listened to it, right? There was this long stretch of sidewalk that you had to go down, kind of down the third base line to get to the outfield. So me and my brother start walking on this sidewalk, and at first we're walking slowly, but pretty quickly our walk has turned into not technically running, but close enough, And in front of us, off in the distance, we can see there's a group of people kind of just hanging out on the sidewalk, and they're in our way. So my brother, he's walking faster than me. He actually, I can see him see the people, and he steps off of the sidewalk onto the grass. And as soon as his feet hit that grass, he starts to run. And I'm the younger brother, so of course I am going to do what I see my older brother doing. So I also step off of the sidewalk onto the grass, except where I step off of the sidewalk, there is a puddle. And as soon as my feet hit that grass and I start to run, my feet go flying out from underneath me, right? And my arm comes down on the edge of the sidewalk, and this bone right here, snaps. And instantly, I am in pain, and I am scared because I was running, right? Next thing you know, we are in the car, headed to the hospital, and at this point, I'm hysterical. I'm 8. I don't know what they're going to do at the hospital. Are they going to chop off my arm? I don't know what happens when you break an arm. I don't know. I'm in a lot of pain, and I'm crying. And my dad is trying to cheer me up. All right, he is giving me a pep talk. He is trying to calm me down. Jonathan, the doctor's They're going to help you. They're not going to hurt you. I'm going to be with you the whole time. You don't need to be scared. But it's not working. I'm still crying. I'm getting more and more hysterical the closer we get to the hospital. And so my dad decides to take a slightly different approach. And I will never, ever forget this. Somehow our eyes, my dad is driving, right, and I'm in the seat behind him, but somehow our eyes lock in the rearview mirror, right? And my dad stares deep into my soul. And he asked me this question that I will never, ever forget. Jonathan, are you a man or a mouse? And I'm 8 years old, with that question just kind of hanging in the air, my dignity on the line, with all the passion that I can muster. I stare back at my dad and I say, I'm a mouse, right? Except I was only 8, my voice had not changed yet, and I was crying, so it was more like, I'm a mouse, My dad loves to tell that story because it's funny. He told it to Eva when we were dating. He has told it to my kids, right? If you ever meet my dad, he will probably tell it to you. Even though that story is about me, I think it actually tells you a lot about my dad also. Because on that car ride to the hospital, there's some dads that would have been yelling the whole time. You should have listened to me. What are you thinking? This is what you get. You deserve this. My dad wasn't yelling, though, right? My dad was giving me a pep talk. I wasn't getting anger from my dad. What I was getting was compassion. Why? Because my dad is a good dad. Rise Church, I have one goal and one goal only for us today. I want to talk about our dad. I want to tell you about your Father in heaven. And I want you to know that he is a good dad. And yeah, it's Father's Day, and I am 100% understanding that brings a lot of mixed emotions in this room today. Some of us are hurting today. Some of us were hurt by our dad. Some of us just miss our dad. But even with all of that, I can say without any doubt in my heart today that your Father in heaven loves you. And he is a good dad. So is it okay this morning, church, if I just tell you a little bit about your dad? Awesome. We're going to look at this promise together. This is James chapter 4, verse 8. This is probably my favorite promise. Here we go. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. I love this promise so much. I think there are two things all of us in this room have to understand about this promise. Number one, this is not a threat. This is good news. Probably some of us will be able to relate to this. When I was little, me and my siblings, the way we knew that we had really messed up, right, and were in big trouble was when my mom would actually stop getting onto us, and she would just say these 5 dreaded words. You've probably heard them. Wait until Dad gets home, right? And I even saying it out loud now, goosebumps, right? Makes me nervous. Because we knew what that meant was that we had done something so bad that my mom didn't even think she was physically capable of punishing us enough by herself, right? No, she needed Dad to get home so they could tag team our punishment together. And you would just have to wait in fear until Dad got home, right? And it could be a few hours, maybe during the summertime. It was most of the day, right? Because you'd got in trouble very early. And I would never know what to do. I'd get pretty scared, and I would just go hide in my room. Usually I'd start updating my will, just in case. To my cousins, I'll leave my Ninja Turtles, all that stuff. I think there can be a danger this morning that even the thought of God coming close to us makes us nervous. It gives us goosebumps, right? But this is not a threat, church. God coming close to us is not a threat. It is really good news because your dad in heaven is a good dad. And when he comes near, good things happen. I love how Psalm 73 verse 28 says it. But as for me, it is good to be near God. It is good news when God comes near to us. And it is good news for so many reasons. I just want to talk about a few of them today. When God comes close, there is joy. This is what I know about dads. A good dad loves to bring joy into their children's lives. He loves to put a smile on their face. He loves to hear their laughter, right? And there is almost nothing that he won't do to bring that joy into his kids' lives. He will even tell some awful dad jokes. Am I right? I was trying to find a good dad joke to tell you this morning. I found a few that I liked. They were all about bees, and I actually thought they were pretty funny, but I told them to my kids, and they did not think they were funny. My daughter actually said these words to me, "Dad, your bee jokes are awful." And if I'm being honest with you, church, that kind of stung, right? Yeah. But a good dad loves to bring joy into his kids' lives, and our Father in heaven is such a good dad. I love how Psalm 16:11 says it. You make known to me the path of life. You will fill me with joy in your presence, with eternal pleasures at your right hand. When God comes near to us, it is good news because he brings joy into our life, but that's not all he brings. When God comes close, there is strength. By no measure, no stretch of the imagination am I the strongest dad in the world, but I have made a vow to my kids that they will never, ever bring me a jar that I can't open, right? A few weeks ago, they brought me this huge jar of animal crackers, and I thought they were pranking me, right? It felt like that lid was glued on or something. I struggled, and I persevered, and I finally got that bad boy open. I had to ask my wife for help, but it still counts, right? We got it open. And I think about how a lot of us, we grow up thinking our dad is the strongest person in the world. And with God, it's actually true. And a good dad, he'll use his strength to protect his kids when they're in trouble. He will use it to help them. He will use it to lift them up when you are down, right? That's what a good dad does with his strength, and that's what our God does with his strength. But the good news this morning is not just that God is strong, he is, but it's even better than that, because the Bible talks about how when God comes near to us, that he actually gives us his strength, that he makes us strong. Even when we are at our weakest, Isaiah 40, verse 29 says this, that he gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak. When God comes close, it is good news because he brings joy, he brings strength, and then one more. When God comes close, there is rest. On Mother's Day this year, Pastor Rebecca spoke about naps, right? And she talked about how as a mom, she loves taking these long, hibernating naps. Total darkness, total silence, the kind of naps where you wake up and you don't even remember your name, right? We've all taken those naps. But every dad in my life naps a little differently than that, right? Because every dad that I have known has this supernatural ability to fall asleep whenever, wherever, at any time, no matter what's going on, right? It doesn't matter. They don't need darkness. They don't need silence. Just give them somewhere to sit. Better yet, give them a recliner and they are out, right? And it can happen mid-conversation. It can happen mid their favorite movie even. It can even happen mid-church. Shout out to the dad sitting in the back right now. I see you. Just kidding. They even have a magical name for these dad naps, right? They're called resting your eyes, right? My grandfather was a master napper, right? I remember growing up in church, and we would get in trouble because we would be giggling because Paul was snoring again. And we would get in trouble for that, not him. It was awesome. He used to tell us the story. One time he was driving home from work late at night, and he got stopped by a train. And the next thing he remembers, he wakes up, the train is long gone, and he has no clue how long he has been sleeping, right? A good dad knows all about rest, and your Father in heaven loves to bring rest into your life. Has anyone experienced the rest of God coming into your life? I know for me, something that I struggled with for a long time. God, has now given me rest from just this burden of carrying all the past mistakes, all my mess ups, all the sin. Like God, he came close and he brought me rest from that, right? He lifted it off of me by showing me his grace. And even I still struggle with this, but all the time, God is bringing me rest from anxiety about the future, about worrying about what tomorrow holds for my life. Because when he comes close, he reminds me that he is in control, and I find rest. I love the whole story of Moses leading the people of Israel out of Egypt. But pretty soon after they make it out of Egypt, Moses is anxious and he's worried and he doesn't know what tomorrow is going to hold. And so he's telling God, I'm worried. What's going to happen? I don't know if I can lead the people. No clue. Like, desert, what? I don't know what's going on. But I love how this is God's words to Moses. Exodus 33:14. My presence will go with you, and I will give you rest. When God comes close to us, we find joy, we find strength, we find rest. I want to read this promise again, James 4:8. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. This is not a threat. This is some really good news. But number two, the second thing you have to know about this promise, this is an invitation, and we have to respond. I don't know if you've ever been invited to something and maybe you chose not to go and later on you regretted that decision. Maybe it was something small, like some friends invited you to a party and you're like, that's going to be lame. But later on you heard it was actually really fun and you wish you had gone, right? Or maybe it was something big that you chose not to go to and turns out it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Maybe you've heard of at least one of these musicians, Elton John, the Spice Girls, Harry Styles, right? Ed Sheeran, Adele, you heard of them? You know what all five of these musicians have in common? They all turned down an invitation to sing at the coronation of the king. Can you imagine turning that down? I once accepted an offer to sing somewhere, true story, because I heard they were going to have free pizza, right? Yeah. I cannot imagine turning down an invitation to sing for a king. Nothing will ever come close to the invitation that God is giving us in James 4:8. It's the greatest invite you will ever receive. God is offering his presence to us, but we have to accept it. We have to make the first move, right? I love these words of Jesus in Revelation 3:20. He said, behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come into him and eat with him, and he with me. This is the same thing. Jesus is offering the same thing promised to us in James 4:8. God says he will draw near to us if we first draw near to him. It's the greatest invitation. And here's the craziest thing about this invitation, right? Some of us will turn it down. Crazy. I love this painting from the 1800s. It was done by an artist named William Holman Hunt. It's called Light of the World, and it depicts these words of Jesus from Revelation. And Jesus is standing at a door. He's knocking. And I don't know if you can tell all these details, but it's a door that looks like it has not been opened in a long time. The hinges are kind of rusty on it. There's a bunch of ivy and stuff growing up the door. But here's the key detail, okay? You can't not miss this, and hopefully you can see. There's no doorknob. There's no handle. This door cannot be opened from the outside. Jesus will stand there and knock until someone opens it from the inside. But if it's opened up, he's coming in. He's bringing himself, right? He is bringing the presence of his Father, which means he is bringing the joy, the strength, the rest of his Father. But somebody has to open the door. Somebody has to answer yes to the knock. We have to accept this invitation. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to us. I want to wrap up today just sharing a story of Jesus with you. It's a story we've all heard. It's a story that is usually called the parable of the prodigal son, even though it's really a story about two sons, and even though really, it's a story about a dad. And Jesus said there was a dad who had two sons, right? And both of these sons had issues. The younger son had maybe the more obvious issues because at some point he comes to his dad and says, Dad, I don't want to be near you anymore, and I want you to go ahead and give me everything that I will inherit when you die so that I can leave and never have to see you again. Ouch, man. As a dad, oh, that hurts. And so this dad, I'm sure, with a broken heart, gives the inheritance to the son. And Jesus said that the son leaves and goes far away to a faraway country. And when he's there, he just makes poor decision after poor decision. He throws his money away, and pretty quickly, he's left with nothing. But in a moment, Jesus says one day, this son comes to his senses. And he realizes it would be better for him to go back and just be a servant for his dad than to stay here and keep living the way that he's living. And because it's a long journey, he starts out on this journey, but he has a lot of time to think, right? He has a lot of time to decide what he's going to do. So he starts writing this amazing speech. You know, it's the best speech he's ever written. And he's going to convince his dad. He is going to plead his case with his dad. Not that he would be accepted back as his dad's son, because he knows that's off the table. He's made way too many mistakes for that. But he is going to plead that his dad would just let him come back and work for him as a servant, right? And can you imagine how scared this son must have been making that journey home? This is way worse than waiting for your dad to come home from work, right? He is having to physically step after step walk toward the punishment that is waiting for him, walk toward the potential wrath, the potential rejection of his father. How scary. But is it okay if I tell you a little bit about his dad? He's not an ordinary dad. He is not you get this, what you deserve. Like, how dare you? You should have listened to me. He's not that kind of dad. He is a good dad. And Jesus says the whole time the son has been gone, this dad has been waiting. And he has been hoping. And he has been dreaming of the day when his son would come home. And most importantly, Jesus says he has been watching. And I just imagine that he even had his best recliner moved out on the porch, right? So he could always be watching. And Jesus says that this dad sees his son coming home in the distance. And this good dad takes off running. If he's anything like this dad, right, his knees are creaking. He's got some pain in his back, but nothing is stopping him today. And he runs to his son, and when he makes it to him, he's not yelling at him, right? He embraces him and hugs him. Jesus even says he's giving him kisses, which I'm sure the son was like, what is going on? And the son starts trying to give his speech, but the dad interrupts him and is like, I don't have time for that. Hey, servant, you go get my best robe. Hey, you other servant, go get the family jewelry. Come and put it on my son. Hey, you go ahead and go fire up that barbecue. And then all the other servants, head into town. Let everyone know my son that was lost has been found. My son that I thought was dead is now alive. He has come home, and you better believe we are going to party. And can you imagine what is going through the mind of that son? All the burden, all the weight of all these terrible decisions, the stupid things that he has done would have just been lifted off of his shoulders in that moment, and he has found rest in the presence of his father. All the weariness of this journey, as soon as he heard that word barbecue, man, he would have had a pep in his step ready to go. And I imagine he was smiling from ear to ear because of the contagious joy of his father. And if we could read his mind, I bet he was thinking something like, I wish I had come home sooner. But what's interesting is Jesus does not tell us what the young son is thinking. But he does tell us what the older son is thinking. And he's mad. He is upset. He has got a big case of the not fairs. Right? Because the whole time the young son was off making a fool of himself, this older son has been at home working with his dad, working for his dad, and he never got a party. What's going on? And Jesus says when that older son comes home that day from working in the field and he sees that his dad is throwing a party for the younger son, he loses it. He is upset and he refuses to go inside into the party, and he stands outside the door and he pouts. And everyone at that party would have been able to see the older brother, the older son, pouting. You probably can relate to this. You ever been at someone's house and maybe it's a husband and wife and they start arguing? Maybe it's a mom and dad and they start getting into it with their kids and you just want to disappear, you know? And you're embarrassed. You think the parents are embarrassed and it's just going poorly. That's how everyone at this party would have felt in that moment, because they could see the older son pouting. And they would have felt embarrassed. They would have wished they could disappear. They would have been embarrassed for the dad, because this older son is trying to ruin this day of celebration, and they would have been fully expecting this dad to finally snap, right, and to lose it, and to go tell his son, you know what, right? Not this dad. He is a good dad. And Jesus says that this dad walks outside, and he goes to his older son, and he pleads with him and invites him to come in and join the celebration. And that's where the story ends. Jesus told us a cliffhanger, right? We don't know what the older son chooses to do. We don't know if he chooses to come into the party or if he continues to stand outside and pout. But I love this story for two reasons. One, it tells us a lot about our dad in heaven, right? This is who our Father in heaven is. He is not a yelling dad. He is a good dad that is waiting for us to come home. There is nothing we can do that will ever make him stop waiting for us to come home. But the second thing I love is that this story tells us a lot about ourselves. Because I think all of us in this room can at some time or another relate to one, if not both, of these sons. Maybe even right now, as I was talking about this young son, like you can relate to him because you feel like you are so far away from God that you could never, ever possibly come home to him. I love this old Turkish proverb. It just says, no matter how far you've gone down the wrong path, turn back. And I love that, yeah. God's not mad at you. He's waiting for you. But it is an invitation. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. Maybe today you're in here and you relate more to this older son, right? And you feel not far away from God, but there's just something that has come up in your life. Maybe some hurt, some anger, some pain, something, and then this made you feel like you are just on the outside of the party, right? That you are outside of God's presence, just looking in, and today you need to open that door and come back inside and find some rest, find some joy, find some strength. It's the same invitation for you. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. It is a promise. It is not a threat. It is really good news, but it is an invitation, and you have to respond.